Yesterday, I went to go meet the landowner, the person who's leasing me the property, the new property. And this is it was very interesting. This was one of the more interesting people that I've ever met. And I'll tell you about this person. This person, they run a business. It's and this is also more or less, and you're gonna see, when I say, this is how the wealthy people make money. You will understand when I talk about it like this. And it's not using me as an example. It is using somebody else's business as an example. All right. And this is also what I mean by when you have somebody who is actually, beyond the average in terms of monetary, situation, in terms of a monetary situation. People who have more have drastically more, right? I talk about this, and there is no fixing that. That's not a problem, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a person who worked for it, and they had equal opportunity as everybody else. I've always said, if you want to go and start yourself a cattle farm, nobody's stopping you. Let's see it, right? And talk is cheap. Let's see it. Nobody's stopping you, right? At the end of the day, if you want to do it, go and do it, right? As long as everybody has the equal opportunity. And I've also said that when I give away this information, I'm not just giving away the information to, one or two. I'm giving the info. If you want to figure out how I do it, if you want to see how I do it, then I will give you the information for free. I give away the information for free, equal access. It's all free. I don't want anything from anybody. I don't want your money. Trust me, you're not paying me to do anything. All right. I don't care. You could die tomorrow. I don't care. All right. I'm serious. Nobody's paying me to do anything. I'm not selling you anything. All right. I do very well for myself. And also, this whole thing about it, I will use somebody else's business as an example of this. I met somebody yesterday who was, one of the more interesting people that I have ever met. And this person, they crowdfund large real estate deals. So this person is also an agent. And so what they do is they crowdfund large real estate deals. They will go and they will buy, tens of thousands of acres. Okay. They will go and they will buy tens of thousands of acres. They will, buy tens of thousands of acres, and then they will subdivide the properties and sell them out at smaller pieces. So they'll buy like a 4,000 acre field. They will buy a 4,000 acre field. And then they will, if they have an interest in if anybody wants to buy like 100 acres of that 4,000 acres, they will divide the 1,000 acres out of the 4,000 acres. They will divide the 100 acres out of the 4,000 acres. They will increase the price per acre, right? I've always said, when you buy a large piece of land, that large piece of land, the cost per acre will go down. All right, the cost per acre will go down. And so they will buy a very large piece of land. They will buy this agent will buy, thousands of acres at a time. And then they will subdivide the property. And so if somebody wants to buy 250 acres, they will sell the 250 acres. They will subdivide out the 250 acres and raise the price. They will raise the price on the acreage. And so, I was like, that's a very interesting business. And that actually, I was like, maybe one day I should do that too, right? Maybe one day when I start buying myself land, I should just start subdividing small portions of it and increasing the price per acre and selling it out, right? That'd be a good idea. Because if you think about it, I mean, that's a very smart idea. This is a very interesting business because land is a pristine asset. I've always said land is a pristine asset, right? I've said this for a long time. Land is a pristine asset. If you take it to the bank and you ask the banker what it's worth, they will tell you what it's worth. It will always be worth something, right? And so, she more or less has the exact same business model as me, right? And I've always said that, it's not just me. Everybody, if you have a significant amount of money, if you have any sort of significant amount of money, I can almost guarantee that you are doing this business model. And I've always said that in terms of like the generic formula for creating wealth, it's like copy and paste across every single sector of the economy. Everybody more or less does it the exact same way, unless you are like some like world-class, athlete. world-class, musician, world-class lawyer. Like if you were a world-class student, then I mean, you can go and you can be you can be a top lawyer, or you can be a top doctor, or you can be a whatever, you can be a world-class musician. But in terms of like the generic formula for the average person creating wealth, it's almost always done via pristine assets. And this lady is a very good example of this. This person is a very good example of this, right? And I was like, this is a very interesting business. And, I should probably, do this one day too. Like if I buy a massive piece of land, I should just subdivide out small pieces of it and sell it at an increased price per acre, right? That's a very smart idea. That's a very intelligent idea. But, but that's, and I've always said that the whole thing about, wealthy people, like, and I even use me as an example. I don't care, like this person, the whole thing about it is, as long as you do not come off as a poor person, as long as you do not come off as a poor person, if you do not come, I guarantee it, if you come off as a poor person, there will be no discussion. All right. You'll be left behind. But as long, because this person, I mean, they do very well for themselves. They, and I've listened to their business plan. I was like, this is a very solid business. This is a very good idea. Because if you buy a massive piece of land, right? If you buy a massive piece of land, and then, that's why also she wanted to meet me. Because, and I've always said that finding somebody who is actually good at anything is almost impossible. It's very rare. And, and I've always said that my work is pristine. Like when I farm, I may legitimately be the best in the world at it. I may legitimately be the best in the world at it. One of the best. I don't know anybody in this area of business. I don't know anybody else that does this kind of work other than me. All right. And, so she wanted to meet me. And so, so I went and met her. And I was like, this is one of the most this is one of the more interesting people that I've ever met in my entire life. And she has a very interesting business model. She's an agent. So she's an agent, and she will crowdfund these large real estate purchases. She will go and she will buy 4,000 acres. She will go and she will buy 1,000 acres. She will go and she will buy, 500 acres. She'll go and she'll buy all these, she has over 50,000 acres in her real estate portfolio. And then she'll take these acres, and she is also the agent that will represent the deal. So she makes a commission when she purchases these deals. And then she will subdivide the properties and sell the properties at an elevated cost per acre. And when they sell the acreage, she also represents the deal. So she's making a commission on these deals all the time. And she is holding on to a pristine asset. She is holding on to a pristine asset. She has a reasonable idea for increasing the value of the asset. She will subdivide the property out of the bigger piece of land and increase the amount of money that she charges per acre. Right? And she has a pristine asset. She is utilizing a good asset. So that's another business model, right? It's not my business, but that is another business model that exists. And when she was talking to me about this, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should do this one day too. Like if I buy a giant piece of land, I can just take 100 acres out of it and put it on the market, right? Because then the land will cash flow. I will be able to produce some kind of a return on my land, because I can sell the property. I can sell the 100 subdivided acres. I can sell that for an elevated cost. Right, I was like, this is a very intelligent thing to do. I mean, this is a very good business model. And, I was like, maybe one day I should do that too. Just go and buy like 5,000 acres and then, subdivide out a couple hundred acres and then just sell the couple hundred acres, right? And, and I was like, this lady, she knows how to do it. So, I was like, that's very neat. But that's the whole thing about it, and I've always said that the whole thing about, having these discussions is, when you have these discussions, what should you discuss, right? What's the big idea, right? Talk about your successes and discuss assets, right? I've always said discuss assets. The lady asked me about what do I do, right? What do I do, right? What do I do? Where do I see myself going? She actually asked me these things, and I just flat out told her. And this lady, she actually understands the price of cattle. She actually understands the price of cattle. And so when I talked to her about my business, she understood what I was talking about. I told her that I bring in these animals, and I bring them in small and I sell them big. And I remember we, at one point in the conversation, she was like, oh, 3 years ago, you used to be able to buy one of these calves for like $600. You used to be able to buy a little calf, 200-pound calf, for $600. And I was like, yeah, but nowadays, it's about $1,000, it's about $1,200. And if you get a bigger one, if you get an 800-pound animal, you get about $2,200 for the animal. And then she was like, yeah, everything's expensive. And so she obviously knew something about the cattle business. All right, she obviously knew something about the cattle business. And so when I spoke to her about my business, I could tell that she understood. And so I was like, this was one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. And I was like, you know what, maybe one day I should do that too, right? If I buy myself a giant piece of land, I should just subdivide out a couple hundred acres out of it and sell it for an elevated cost per acre, right? And that would produce me a cash flow from the land itself. And I was like, that was very interesting. And then she spoke to me about where do I see myself doing? But this is a person, and I've always said that when you have a wealthy person, when you have somebody who is legitimately beyond the average in terms of financials, they will have drastically more than anybody else. That's how the world works. There is no fixing that. That's not a problem. Right? Like if you want to set up a crowd fund and you want to purchase large acreages and you want to subdivide properties and you want to be a real estate agent and you want to sell these properties, if that's what you want to do, you can go to. Anybody can do it, right? There are many business models. I've always said that there are a lot of ways to make money. A lot of ways. You don't have to be a farmer to make money. You don't have to be a real estate agent. You can be anything. You can go into stocks, as long as you are utilizing a pristine asset and you understand that there are things in the world that are worth money that are not cash. And you should have a realistic idea for developing your wealth via an asset, as long as you understand that. All right, if you do not, if you go on some, oh my God, well, I fell out of heaven at 7 and everything's impossible and I can't do anything because the world is unfair, then you're going to die poor and you should probably just keep it to yourself. All right, because nobody cares. All right, you're actually going to ruin any opportunity that you have of doing better for yourself if you act like that. All right, I guarantee it. What is something that you can realistically do? I mean, the whole thing about, in terms of these conversations, right? What is a very, what should be discussed in these conversations? Assets. Making returns on assets, right? I've talked about this all the time. That is every rich person, any person who is legitimately well-to-do financially, well-to-do, like this person is definitely beyond the average. How will you know this? This person will have drastically more than everybody else. And that is not unfair. All right, that is not unfair. That's how it will always be. Right? And I've always said that the biggest way, the most, and use me as an example of this, there is no easy answer. But if you the most realistic opportunity that you have in your life of legitimately doing better for yourself financially is to hang around rich people. Hang around people that are actually doing it. There is no magical deal. There is no easy answer. The most realistic opportunity that anybody on the planet has of legitimately doing better for themselves is to hang around rich. If you want to do better for yourself financially, hang around people who are wealthy. I've always said, if you manage to find a rich person, I'm serious, if you legitimately manage to find a wealthy individual, chances are you will never meet another one again. All right, unless you are wealthy yourself. If you are wealthy people will associate themselves. They may also have found one or two other wealthy people, and you will probably meet their wealthy friends. You probably will. All right, but in terms of if you are not wealthy, if you are not extremely well-to-do financially, if you manage to find a rich person, if you manage to find one person who is legitimately like, I think this person is legitimately wealthy, that may be the only wealthy person you ever meet in your entire life. I'm serious. Like something like this, I mean, you have to understand. It's like it's borderline 0%. Borderline 0%, like a 0.000000001% chance. If you were in a room with 200,000 people, do you think you could find the one person in that room? If you managed to find this person, it would be like some cosmic wind, right? And how do you find these people? And I guarantee it, the way that you do it is you discuss your assets. Every rich person loves assets, every single last one of them. Every single rich person, every single wealthy person loves assets. Every single last one of them, okay? And talk about making a return on your asset. Right? Talk about the returns of your assets. That is the rich people will talk about assets, what they plan to do with their assets and everything. You can talk to them about that forever and they will never get bored. You can legitimately sit there and talk to them about assets forever. Every rich person, every wealthy person loves assets. Every single last one of them. Talk about making a return on your asset. I buy these cattle. When I get on your land, I will clear the trees and then I will herbicide your field. Once the grass starts growing in, I will fertilize the field and then I will put cattle on it. When I bring in these cattle, I bring them in small and I sell them at about 800. Right? I mean, I sell the heifers at about 700. Right? And and the lady obviously knows something about the cattle business. Right? When I talked to her about my business, she said that's good, right? And then when she talked to me about her business, I was like, that's good too. That's fantastic. This is a fantastic business model. This is something that I should do. Right? When I go and I buy myself large pieces of land, I should subdivide out small pieces of it, raise the price per acre, and liquidate. That would actually produce me a return with the land itself. And then you can just hold on to large pieces of land. She has almost 50,000 acres in her real estate portfolio. And while I was actually discussing this with her, when I was actually discussing what was going on with my farm, she actually gave me another 50 acres. And these 50 acres are, they're 8 minutes away from the property. But these acres are pristine. She said the acres are pristine. There's a giant pond right in the middle of the property. And there were no trees or nothing. And there's nothing. I mean, the acres are completely pristine. And she said that I can go and use that field too if I want. But this is a very realistic example of somebody who has legitimate rich people problems. I got 50,000 acres of land in my real estate portfolio, and I subdivide these properties out one at a time. And I'm a real estate agent as well. And I represent these deals. I represent these deals, and that's how I make a commission. And when I subdivide out the properties, we make money on the liquidation of the subdivisions. But along the way, you're still going to be in a situation where you have large amounts of land, right? So who's going to take care of the land while you're subdividing it and you're liquidating it, right? All that stuff takes time. But this is a very realistic, I was like, this is a very interesting person, right? This is a very interesting person. If anything, I should do that too, right? I should, when I buy myself large pieces of land, I should subdivide out parts of my property, raise the price per acre, and liquidate that too. I should. That's a fantastic idea. And I told her about my business, and I told her about what I was doing and everything, and she leased me another 50 acres 5 minutes away, 7 minutes away from the property. And I was like, but these acres are pristine. She said, you can just go and use it if you want. And I was like, and I was like, well, that's fantastic. It's only 50 acres, but at least, but it's 7 minutes down the road. That's fantastic. But, she's going to go and take a look at a deal in Austin today, and her son is going to go take a look at a deal in Houston. All right. She has and she also told me that when, and I've told her that, I'm in the cattle business and I am looking to expand the size of my herd, and I'm going to do it pretty drastically. I told her, about what I got going on, right? By about March of next year, I would anticipate that I have about 120 cattle. And at that point, I will go to the bank and I will take a loan for more cattle. All right. I'm not going to be using any debt, right? I'm just going to reinvest my money And by about March of next year, I will go and take a loan. And you know, sometime between now and March of next year, I would anticipate that I take a loan for more cattle, right? And I buy more. And she said, oh, well, that's good. And then she gave me another 50 acres, right? And so you know, and then she told me, you know, when you get it all figured out, you know, once I get it done, to let her know, and then she will you know, look into leasing me more property. But you know, this is a very realistic example of what this legitimately looks like, and not using me as an example, using somebody else as an example, right? You know, using somebody else as an example. This is a very realistic look at it. I mean, she utilizes a pristine asset, land. She has a very reasonable idea for increasing the value of the asset via subdivision. If she buys a 4,000 acre tract of land and subdivides 100 acres out of it, the 100 acres will be worth more per acre than the 4,000 acres. Then she liquidates the property. She liquidates the subdivisions. When she does that, she is also the real estate agent for the subdivisions. And she is also the real estate agent for the acquisition of the large piece of land. She gets a commission. She gets a percentage of everything. That's very smart, right? You know, she more or less has the exact same business model as me, just in a different sector of the economy. And I was like, this is a very, you know, and I was like, you know what, maybe one day, you know, when I buy myself large pieces of land, you know, me, I'm not really focused on buying land, just because, you know, I don't really, and I've always, you know, the whole thing about this is that, you know, a lot of people have this problem in this area. A lot of people have these problems in this area where, you know, they will have large pieces of land, and they will have, you know, and nobody will. And she actually told me that that on the 100, you know, on the 200, on the 190 acre lease that I got, she actually told me that they had a farmer on that property for 5 years, but the guy was an idiot. The guy was an idiot, and they fired him. That's what happened, and that's why the property got put back on the market. And so she's giving me a chance to do it. And you know, and I had a conversation with her yesterday, and during that conversation, she gave me another 50 acres. And so, you know, and then she told me, you know, once you get it all figured out, let me know, and you know, we'll take a look at leasing you more property. And so, you know, but that's effectively how it goes. I mean, you know, and I've always said that the whole thing about, you know, like when you're going to communicate, you know, when you communicate, the thing to communicate about, you know, the most realistic, you know, and I've always said, develop an idea for an investment. You need to understand some kind of an investment, understand something, some kind of an investment. It has to be an investment. Rich people, wealthy people love making money with their money. Every single last one of them, okay? I guarantee it. Every single rich person, every single wealthy person loves making money with their money. That's the big idea, utilizing your capital to generate a positive return. And the only way to, and always do it with a good asset. Always do it with a pristine asset. Don't use some wonky asset that nobody knows and nobody even cares about. Use a good asset. Use a pristine asset. And when you discuss these assets, discuss the idea of making a return with the asset itself. Every rich person, every wealthy person loves this idea. Every single last one of them. All right, and it's like the most generic formula for how to go along these discussions. I have this asset, I have these cattle. I would reasonably anticipate that when I liquidate my cattle, I will be able to buy more. I would say that I have somewhere around 120 cattle by March of next year. Once I have my 120 cattle, I am planning to go to the bank and take a loan for more cattle. Right, these cattle all, you know, I will just reinvest the money, and you know, as I go along, I will, you know, reinvest the money that I make, and that will grow the size of my herd. And I would take a loan sometime by about March of next year. And this is also, you know, I know that when I talk about these things, you have to understand that it is what it is. I mean, you know, my whole thing about this is that, you know, you cannot share the pie evenly, but everybody has access to the pie. Everybody has access to it. You cannot share the pie evenly. That's wrong. And I've used the most realistic example of this is if everybody was given a 10-acre field. If everybody on the planet was given a 10-acre field and you were just like, everybody just, just do what, do whatever it is that you're going to do, and you just left it alone for maybe 5 years, I would have more or less just, taken, disproportionately more land if left to do so. Because you have to understand that at the end of the day, some people don't want the land. Some people rather have the money, right? I've always said that, if you're legitimately interested in money, then you should just go and make money, all right? Because if you legitimately want to become a farmer, you're gonna have to work on this. You're gonna have to work on this for a long time. All right, if you're fast, you might be able to get to the 10% mark in 3 years. You might be able to. All right, but you're not gonna wake up tomorrow and do this. I guarantee it. And if you legitimately think that you can, then let's see it. All right, you're either very naive or you're very dumb. I may legitimately be the best in the world. All right, nobody makes money like I effectively, I don't, except for maybe this lady. All right, maybe this lady. All right, I didn't, this lady probably does make more money than me. All right, but my whole thing about it though is that my business is compounding. The rate of compounding that I am achieving, I would reasonably anticipate, because something like that, in terms of her business model, the amount of compounding growth that you can achieve is not very large. I mean, on a portfolio like that, if you even if you only make 5% return a year, if you only make 5 or 7% return a year, that would be enough money to effectively do anything. It is a massive sum of money if you only make a 5 or 7% return a year. But my business, this business, although it's not that large, my business is compounding at about 5 to 7% a month. My business is growing by about 5 to 7% a month, not per year, a month. All right, and you have to understand that there is a massive compounding effect to what I am doing. My business is growing drastically on a portfolio like that, on something like that. I mean, you might be able to reach if you made 10% a year on something like that, that would be a freaking awesome return. That would be a phenomenal return. But I would anticipate on a portfolio like that, 5 or 7% a year. Maybe 5 or 7% a year. All right, it's not, you're not, but also the thing about real estate is that I don't exactly know, because real estate, the thing about real estate is that you can utilize leverage for real estate. Real estate is one of the best things in terms of utilizing leverage. Like a lot of these properties, if you only put 20% down, the bank will legitimately leverage your money 5 to 1. They will give you the other 80%. All right, I don't know any other sector of the economy that will do that. All right, sometimes like even for residential real estate, if you put 3.5% down, they will leverage it 33 to 1. They will give you the other 96.5%. The bank will give you the other 96.5%. And if we consider the idea of leverage, if you have a 20%, if you have a 20% equity stake in your portfolio and you have an interest only loan for the rest of the 80%, and then and then you have that real estate portfolio, then I mean, yeah, you can make drastically more money. But I don't know the fine details of her business, but her business model is something that I understand. It's more or less the exact same business model as mine. It's more or less the exact same business model. And I've always said that the whole thing about rich people, the whole thing about wealthy people, is that when wealthy people meet other rich or wealthy people, it's not even if you're rich or wealthy, as long as you are not poor, right? As long as you don't act like a poor person, they are almost always going to be very, 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 very happy to meet others, because it's so rare. It's very rare. It's very rare. I mean, it's almost a 0% probability. Almost a 0% probability, as long as you are not poor. You don't even have to have a large sum of money. Oh, well, you've got yourself a business, and I've listened to your business idea, and your business that's a good business. And, I've clearly indicated that I'm growing the business, and that's, and it's got pristine assets. That's good, right? This guy will probably do better for himself in the future. As long, it doesn't really matter what else, money, the whole thing about money is that money is whatever. Money is whatever. It's borderline negligible. It doesn't matter. You can always make more money. Even if I had nothing, I can make more money. Money is negligible. It doesn't matter. As long as you don't act like a poor person, right? And what is a very realistic thing for you to do to not act like a poor person? Discuss assets and discuss your successes. All right, I have these cattle. I am looking to grow my business by this much by liquidating my animals and reinvesting the money. Once I have reinvested my money, I will take a loan against my animals and I will buy more animals. All right, I have this many animals right now, and I would reasonably anticipate that in the next 8 or 9 months, I will have these many animals. Well, that's very good. Here's another 50 acres. When you get this all situated, let me know and I will lease you more property. Right, and then she talked to me about her business. Right, she talked to me about her business. I crowdfund large real estate purchases. I'm a real estate agent. I represent the deal when we crowdfund the large deal, and I also represent the deal when we subdivide the properties. I make a commission on it all the way. When I subdivide the properties, I increase the price per acre. That will make the value of the acreage go up. That's very good. Land is a pristine asset. When you have something like 50,000 acres, I mean, that's a phenomenal situation. If you have something like 50,000 acres in your real estate portfolio, even if you only make 5 or 7% return on that portfolio, you will make a massive amount of money. You don't need 5 or 7% a month. If you make 5 or 7% a year, even if you only make 1% a year on that, because at the end of the day, real estate is an appreciating asset. Real estate is a pristine asset. It's not a depreciating asset. Real estate is a pristine asset. And so, if you just hold on to it, and while you hold on to it, the value of the land will go up over a long period of time. That's a very smart, that's a very good business. That's a very good business model. And when I listened to her idea, I was like, this is something that I should do too. If I buy myself a massive piece of land, I should just subdivide out small sectors of it and put it on the market for an elevated cost per acre. Right? That's very smart. But that's effectively the situation that, but that's her asset portfolio, but that's all it is. I mean, and this is also what I mean by, when you have somebody who legitimately is wealthy, when you have somebody who is legitimately rich, they will have disproportionately more than everybody else. And that's not because they did some malicious thing. It's not because they were some horrible person. At the end of the day, and I've always said that the whole thing about becoming rich, the whole thing about becoming wealthy, there is no easy way to do it, and there is no guaranteed way to do it. But you will drastically increase your probabilities of becoming rich and or wealthy if you hang around rich and or wealthy people. All right, because everybody more or less does the exact same thing. I guarantee it. That's the only way to really increase your probabilities of making it. If you hang around poor people, you will become poor. I can almost guarantee it. All right, this is a very realistic example of this. She gave me her business idea. I listened to her business idea, and I was like, this is a fantastic idea. This is a fantastic business model. She's an agent too, right? And she goes and she represents her deals. And that's the whole thing about it. When you have a person who is rich and or wealthy, when they meet somebody who is legitimately not poor, even if you don't have a lot, as long as you are not poor, the chances are that person will be very happy to meet you, very interested in meeting you. They will be interested in seeing what you have to do. I guarantee it. Every rich person, every rich and or wealthy person loves the idea of making money with their money, making a positive return on pristine assets. Every rich and or wealthy person does. Everyone, every single last one of them. rich and or wealthy, every single last one of them. And as long as you are not poor, they will be happy to meet. They will be interested in meeting you. I would say interested. They would be interested in meeting you. They will want to hear about your business. They will want to hear about your assets. They will want to hear about, what you are doing with these assets, right? Talk about your successes. They will want to know. I guarantee it. Every single last one of them. And then they will tell you about their business as well. They will tell you about their asset portfolio. And more or less, almost all the time, it will be the exact same model. The model will be the exact same. I have this pristine asset. This is how I increase the value of the asset. And this is how I put, the positive cash flow. Guaranteed. This is how I make a return on the asset. I'm a real estate agent, and I make a commission when I sell the property and also when I purchase the large property. I'm a real estate agent, and I make a commission off of that. When I have this large piece of property, I will subdivide it and increase the price per acre. That's how I make the positive return on the money, right? And I hold on to the assets for effectively forever, right? 50,000 acres, forever. Just hold on to it. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't matter. You just hold on to it, and over a long period of time, it'll go up in value anyway. And it is a pristine asset, right? That's a wonderful business plan. That's a wonderful business plan. Makes a lot of sense to me. It's more or less exactly what I'm doing, and it's more or less what every rich person does. Here is the asset that I have. I increase the value of the asset by doing this. I produce cash flow by doing this. I'm an agent and I make a commission on it. All right, and et cetera, et cetera. That, making returns, using your money to make money. Every rich person and or wealthy person loves that idea. All right, and and as long as you are not poor, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have whatever. It doesn't matter if you are, worth a fraction. It doesn't matter to them. I guarantee it. Any person who is rich and or wealthy, they will be interested in meeting you as long as you are not poor. I guarantee it. Don't act like a poor person, right? Oh, I'm going to go on a magical journey on your property. Oh, this is my dream. Nobody cares about your dreams. Nobody cares about your magical journey. Nobody cares about your opinions. Discuss assets. Objectively discuss assets. Objectively discuss assets. That's how you go and you start to communicate with rich and or wealthy people. Because if you go to a rich and or wealthy person and you talk to them about your trials and tribulations and whatever, they won't care. They will immediately just associate you as a poor. They will look at you and think you're a poor person, and then congratulations, you'll probably never meet another one again. Discuss your assets. This is how much of a return I make on my capital. This is how I make returns on my capital. This is how I make money with my money. This is how I do it. They love that idea. Every rich person, every wealthy person loves that idea. Oh my God, well, I fell out of heaven at 7 and my life's a magical journey and I was born to do this. Nobody cares. All right, you're going to die poor. All right, I have these cattle. I am reasonably anticipating that I end up with these many cattle. When I liquidate my animals, I will reinvest the money. I will reinvest the earnings back into my business, and I will grow my herd to about this many animals within this time frame. Right, I know this is how I will get rid of the trees. Right, this is how I'll get rid of the trees. I will use herbicide, and I will use a bulldozer and an herbicide. Right, and et cetera, right? I mean, that's effectively how it's done. It's a very straightforward, because at the end of the day, every rich person, every wealthy person loves this idea. All right, nobody cares about your opinions. Nobody cares about your magical journey. Have fun dying poor. All right, this is not a joke. All right, and this is a very reasonable way to look at it, other than just looking at my business. All right, I managed to find somebody who is well-to-do financially, and I took a look at their business plan, and they spoke to me about their business, and I understand their business, and it makes a lot of sense to me. In the future, when I buy myself large pieces of land, if I ever go into the buying land, if I ever decide to buy land, if I buy myself a large piece of land, I would do the same thing, right? I could do that too. Just subdivide out a couple hundred acres out of it, raise the price per acre, and sell it. That's a very smart idea. All right, and I was like, that's a wonderful thing to know, right? But I did get myself more property. After the discussion, I told her what I was doing. I told her what I was looking to accomplish, and we talked about it, and she gave me another 50 acres. And the 50 acres, she told me they're pristine. There's nothing that needs to be done on them. I can effectively just go and drop cattle off on them tomorrow, and it's 7 minutes away from the property that I have. And so now I have about 375 acres. And she also told me that when I'm done working on the acreage, to let her know, and she will lease me more property. So I was like, that's fantastic. So she told me, when you're done, let me know and I will lease you more property. That's fantastic, right? I mean, that's fantastic, but that's what happens. When you have a person who is rich and or wealthy, they will have disproportionately more than everybody else. I've talked about this. If you legitimately, and I've even said that, there are times, like if I walk into a room and there are legitimately like 150, 200 people in that room, I may legitimately make more money than all 200 of those people combined. That's another way to look at it. And this is a person who, this person might make more money than 2,000 people combined. Maybe, may have access to more capital than 2,000 people combined. And this is why I say, you should, look to do business with rich people. Look to do business with wealthy people. Find out what the wealthy people are doing. Find out what the rich people are doing. All right, find out what they're doing, and and surround yourself with rich people, surround yourself with wealthy people. Because there is no easy way to do it, but you will drastically improve your chances of making it if you legitimately, and I've always said that YouTube is something like social media, and I'm not talking about a fake poser flexer. All right, I'm not talking about somebody who rented themselves a Lamborghini and bought themselves a designer bag on a credit card, and now they're on Instagram posting pictures of their trip to the beach. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuinely wealthy people, genuinely rich people. How do you know that? How do you determine whether or not someone is genuinely rich and or wealthy? How do you determine that? You look at their balance sheet and appraise their assets. You take a look at their assets. Why do you do that? Because almost anything on the planet that is worth any sum of money, that is any kind of significant sum of money, will almost always be guaranteed to be an asset. Almost always. So if you look at the balance sheet and you appraise the asset, that is how you know whether or not you are looking at a rich and or wealthy person. That's how you know. Discuss assets. That's how you figure it out. Making returns on capital. That's a very, very, very good thing to talk about. Every rich person, every wealthy person loves talking about that. Capital, making capital, making money with capital. I have this asset and I have a way of making money with this asset, making money with the money itself. Every rich person, every wealthy person loves that. All right, look at the balance sheet, appraise the assets. That's how.